I faked my own death to find out the truth about my own daughter. The whole town cried at my funeral, except for my daughter. I heard her whisper, "Finally." She didn't know that I had been listening all this time. And that was just the beginning. I had always been a quiet observer, a woman who kept to herself, not prone to making waves. At 55, I had seen enough of the world, and most importantly, enough of my own family, to know that the truth was something rarely spoken aloud. But something about Emily, my daughter, had always unsettled me. It wasn't the obvious things, like her quick temper or her tendency to disappear for days without telling me where she'd been. No, it was something deeper, a coldness in her eyes sometimes, a shift in her voice when she thought I wasn't paying attention. She was hiding something. I could feel it in my bones. I tried not to think about it. After all, I had my own life to deal with, my husband, Michael, and I had long since stopped pretending we were happy. He had his own business, and I had my role as the quiet housewife. We went through the motions, smiling for appearances, but when the lights went off and the door shut behind us, we were strangers. I never expected him to be the one I had to worry about, though. It was always Emily who haunted my thoughts. That morning, though, everything changed. It started with a dull ache in my chest, something familiar and fleeting. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just the stress of the day, but then it hit, a wave of pain so sharp it took my breath away. I staggered, clutching at my chest, my vision fading in and out. The world spun in a dizzying blur as I crumpled to the floor. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was Emily's face, blurry and distorted, as she shouted my name, "Mom." It was the last sound I heard before the void took me completely. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital room, the steady beep of machines keeping time with my pulse. I was surrounded by sterile white walls and the faint smell of antiseptic. I tried to move, but a wave of dizziness made me close my eyes again. The nurse was at my side instantly, her soft voice asking if I could hear her. I nodded weakly, unsure of how to process what had just happened. "You had a heart attack," the nurse explained, her eyes filled with professional concern. "But don't worry, you're stable now. We'll need to keep you under observation for a few days." I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry. I didn't care about the heart attack. I wasn't afraid of death. No. What bothered me, the thing that nagged at my mind more than anything, was that Emily hadn't been crying. She hadn't seemed worried. When I was rushed to the hospital, she had been too calm, almost indifferent. That nagging feeling I'd been living with for years flared up again. It hit me like a thunderbolt. Was she relieved? Had my death crossed her mind before I even collapsed? What if, just maybe, she was secretly hoping I would disappear? The doctors cleared me to go home the next day, but something had changed in me. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into the hospital just a day before. I could feel the weight of the secret I'd been keeping, quietly, passively, for years. But now, I couldn't pretend anymore. It was as if my own mortality had slapped me across the face and told me that I wasn't guaranteed another day. When I returned home, everything felt off. The house was silent. Too silent. Emily was nowhere to be found. Michael was in his study, buried in work as usual, but I wasn't content with just going through the motions anymore. I needed to know the truth. I needed to see things with my own eyes. The idea came to me while I was sitting in the kitchen, staring at the family photos that lined the walls. What if I faked my death? What if I could somehow orchestrate the disappearance of my own life? Just to see who would care and who would be relieved. It was a sick thought, I'll admit, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I'd been playing the role of a dutiful wife and mother for years, but who was I really? Who was my daughter when the mask was gone? What was Michael hiding behind his calm exterior? I needed to know. The next few days were a blur. I researched everything, how to fake my death, how to set things up so that no one would question it. I found a lawyer willing to help me with the paperwork, I set up secret cameras around the house and hidden microphones in places where I could hear every word my family spoke. The idea was simple: I would disappear. They would think I was dead, but I would be watching, listening, uncovering the truth. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't do this now, I would never get the answers I so desperately needed. The plan was set. The night before I was supposed to disappear, I sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the empty house. I thought about Emily, about how I had raised her, tried to protect her from a world that wasn't always kind. She was my child, my flesh and blood, but what if the child I thought I knew wasn't the person I imagined? What if I was wrong about her? What if she had been hiding something dark, for years? As I prepared myself to vanish, a cold shiver ran down my spine. The idea of watching my own funeral, of hearing my family's reactions to my death, was unsettling, but it was the only way to know for sure. And that night, I did it. I became a ghost in my own home. At my funeral, I stood at the back of the room, disguised and hidden from view, watching as my family mourned, or at least, pretended to. The tears, the prayers, they were all for show. Emily stood by the coffin, her face a mask of sorrow, but as the others turned their attention elsewhere, I heard her mutter something under her breath. Finally. The words echoed in my ears, and for a moment, I felt my heart stop. Finally? Finally. What? Was my death a relief to her? Did she truly feel freed by it? I couldn't help but feel betrayed. But this was just the beginning. The truth was about to come crashing down. It was the silence that disturbed me the most. In the days following my supposed death, I sat in the shadows of my own home, hidden behind carefully placed cameras and microphones. The plan was simple: observe, let them speak freely, unaware that I was still watching. It was supposed to be a matter of curiosity, a way to test the strength of the lies that had been festering under my roof. What I didn't expect was how quickly the atmosphere would turn chilling. The first few hours after the funeral felt like a blur. My family, Michael, my husband, and Emily, went through the motions. There were visits from distant relatives and family friends, the typical hum of a gathering that was supposed to be about mourning, but I didn't feel mourned. I felt forgotten. I wasn't even sure who the tears were for. Michael, whose face was as blank as ever, barely acknowledged the loss. His performance was flawless. Emily, on the other hand, seemed almost relieved. I had expected sadness. I had expected heartbreak. Instead, there was a strange sort of calm, a relief, and that, more than anything, sent a cold shiver through me. It was the evening after the funeral when I heard Emily's voice again, low and venomous, speaking to someone on the phone. Finally, she's gone. It was the right move. I couldn't take it anymore. You know, she was always suspicious, always questioning everything. Now, we can live the way we were supposed to. Those words stuck with me. Emily, my daughter, my flesh and blood, had been playing a part one hadn't even known existed. As I sat there in the darkness, feeling the weight of her words settle deep within my chest, I realized something important. The Emily I had raised, my sweet, innocent girl, wasn't the person I thought she was. She had been lying to me, deceiving me for years. What was the truth? Who had she become? I could hear the harshness in her voice, the resentment, the bitterness. She hadn't been worried when I collapsed. She hadn't been devastated by the loss of her mother. No, she was relieved. I replayed the recording over and over again, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. But there it was, my daughter, with all the venom and hate that had been simmering beneath the surface for who knew how long. This wasn't just some fleeting frustration. This was something deep. The next day, I decided to take the next step in my investigation. I knew the conversations I had heard were just the beginning. I needed more. I needed the full picture, every last hidden corner of their lives. So, I contacted the fake lawyer I had set up earlier, the one who had helped me with the paperwork to make my death look real. It was time to set the next stage of my plan into motion. The lawyer, A shrewd man named Charles. Wasn't what I would call trustworthy, but that was exactly why I needed him. He was a man who knew how to cover his tracks and navigate the legal world with the deftness of a shadow. We had arranged everything meticulously, and I had asked him to draw up a fake will in my name, one that I would never truly sign. But it didn't matter. It was a tool, an instrument to stir the pot, to create doubt, to get the people around me talking. The will contained clauses that would give Emily a sizable inheritance, but only if she was willing to meet certain conditions. The conditions, of course, were fabricated, a ruse to get her to reveal her true intentions. I told Charles to deliver the documents to Michael first. He was the key. I knew he was hiding something. I could feel it in my bones. The way he had behaved after the funeral, the way he had been cold, distant, more so than usual. Was he pretending to mourn? Or was he just pretending? Period? It wasn't long before I overheard a conversation between Michael and Emily. They were talking about the will, about the inheritance, about the conditions I had supposedly set. But what caught my attention wasn't just their words, it was the tone. "She's gone now, Michael. We don't need to worry about her," Emily said, her voice colder than I had ever heard it. Michael's voice came through, rough and strained. "We don't need to talk about this now. Let's not do anything hasty." But Emily wasn't having it. "Hasty? She's dead. This is the moment we've been waiting for. We need to make sure we're prepared for what's coming next." The words were like a knife twisting in my chest. Prepared for what's coming next? My own daughter wasn't mourning me. She was already planning the next step in her game. What was it? What was she after? The next few days were a blur of calculations. I watched my family unravel in front of me. Emily's emotions, fake as they were, shifted from the facade of grief to something more calculating. She and Michael seemed to be plotting something behind closed doors. Every time they thought I wasn't watching, I saw them exchange furtive looks, hear whispers of their plans. And the more I observed, the more I began to see patterns. Emily wasn't just upset about me. No, there was more to it. There was someone else she was after. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, but I was still missing the biggest part. One night, as I sat in the darkness of my hidden room, I received another phone call. It was a number I didn't recognize, and at first, I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. "Is this the woman who faked her death?" The voice on the other end was low, almost a whisper. I didn't answer right away, but my heart skipped a beat. How had they found me? Who was this? The voice continued, calm and measured. "I know what you're doing, and I want you to know, you're not the only one with secrets. You're not the only one being watched." I sat frozen, every muscle in my body stiff with fear. "Who is this?" But the line went dead before I could hear any more. The mystery deepened. Someone else was watching, someone who knew what I was doing. But who? I was no longer just a spectator in my own life. The house, once a place of safety and comfort, now felt like a foreign land where shadows lurked around every corner, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. I had thought that faking my death would give me clarity, a way to see who truly cared about me and who was hiding behind their masks. But what I had uncovered in the last few days was far worse than I could have imagined. The phone call had shaken me. Whoever was on the other end knew exactly what I was doing and more. I had no idea how they found me, but I couldn't ignore the growing sense that I was being watched. I had already suspected that Emily had been hiding something, but now I knew there were more players in this game than I had anticipated. The next few days were full of tension. Emily became more erratic in her behavior, and Michael's quiet, calculating demeanor made him look more and more like someone who was hiding something important. The will Charles had created, the one that supposedly set up the inheritance, was now in their hands. But instead of a sense of relief or even joy, there was only a cold, calculating silence between them. They were plotting something, planning something. But what? I set up more hidden cameras, desperate for answers. I needed to hear them speak. to catch the words that they thought would remain hidden forever. It was late one evening when I overheard another conversation between Emily and Michael. This time, their words cut deep, and I felt my heart drop into my stomach. "We need to make sure it looks like she was in pain before it happened," Michael said, his voice low and strained. "What do you mean?" Emily's voice was sharp, demanding. "I mean, the heart attack," Michael continued. "We need to make it look like she was already suffering. That's how it's going to work, Emily. That's how we'll cover our tracks." There was a long pause before Emily responded, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it before. "We don't need to cover our tracks. She's dead. No one's going to question it." "I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the money. There's more than just the will. There's the life insurance policy, too. If anyone finds out we had a hand in it." I could hear Emily's breath catch on the other side of the line. "What are you saying? Are you telling me you're going to kill her?" Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. "No, but we can make sure the money comes to us. We just need to make sure everything looks natural, that no one questions it." I froze, my blood running cold. "Kill me?" The words echoed in my mind, each one more terrifying than the last. They weren't just lying to me, they were planning something far more sinister. I had always suspected that Emily and Michael's relationship was strained, but I never imagined that it could come to this. My own family, plotting my death for money. I couldn't let this go on. I needed to act, but I had to be careful. If they suspected I was still alive, I knew everything would fall apart. I was just a ghost to them now, something they had buried and forgotten. The only way to truly understand their betrayal was to get even closer to the truth. I began to take notes, watching and listening more carefully. I didn't just need their words, I needed evidence. The hidden cameras became my only source of information. The microphone in the living room, strategically placed, recorded their every move. The more I watched, the more I uncovered. 2 days after that conversation, I heard something even more disturbing. "Are we really going to do this?" Emily asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Michael's response was cold and dismissive. "We don't have a choice. We need to act now before anyone gets suspicious. You'll get your share. You've earned it." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I had always believed that Emily's motivations were driven by frustration, by anger, but now, I realized that her emotions were far darker than I had thought. She wasn't just frustrated with me, she had been planning something from the very beginning. I had heard enough. The plans they were making were becoming more concrete, and the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together in a way that I couldn't ignore. Emily had been playing a dangerous game, and Michael was right there with her. Together, they were using me as a pawn in a twisted game of money and power. But it wasn't just about the money anymore. No, this was about control, power, a sick, twisted form of retribution. I knew I had to expose them. I couldn't wait any longer. The time had come to confront my daughter, to confront the life I had built and the lies I had been fed. But I couldn't just do it with words. Words had failed me. I needed action. The plan was simple, but dangerous. I had already put the pieces in place. The fake lawyer, Charles, was in on it. He had already helped me arrange everything so that Emily and Michael would think I was gone for good. The final act would be to return, to come back into their lives in a way that would shatter everything they had carefully built. But when I walked through that door, when I made myself known again, I wasn't going to be the same woman they had known before. I wasn't going to be weak. I wasn't going to be the woman who had been blind to the truth. No, I would be something far darker, something that they would regret ever crossing. The door creaked open with a sound that felt almost unreal, as though the house itself was holding its breath. For a long moment, I stood there, just inside the threshold, watching them from the shadows. It was so surreal, seeing them in the place I once called home, acting as if everything was normal. They had no idea that I was standing there, in the same house, alive and watching. They had no idea that everything was about to change. Emily was sitting at the dining table, Her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. Her eyes were hollow, dark circles under them that had once been absent. She looked like a woman who had been slowly breaking under the weight of her own lies. Michael, beside her, was flipping through papers, his face tight, as though he was preparing for something, a deal, perhaps, or a strategy to further secure their hold on the life they thought they had claimed for themselves. For a moment, I wondered if they even realized how much they had already lost, how much they had sacrificed. But no, they couldn't have known, not yet. I stepped forward, slowly, purposefully. My heart pounded, but my mind was calm. This wasn't just a confrontation. This was my revenge, a slow, methodical unraveling of everything they'd built on betrayal and deception. "Hello, Emily," I said, my voice soft, almost unrecognizable. I wanted to see the shock in her eyes. I wanted to savor the moment when everything they had worked so hard to hide crumbled in front of them. Her head snapped up, her face draining of color. The mug she had been holding trembled in her hands before she set it down with a sharp clang. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Her eyes searched mine, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She stood up, her body rigid, trembling. "No, no, this can't be happening," Emily whispered, her voice breaking. Her hands fluttered to her mouth, as though she might collapse at any moment. Michael turned slowly, his face turning from confusion to disbelief. You were supposed to be dead," he muttered under his breath, but his words were heavy with guilt. His eyes darted around, almost frantic, as though trying to find an escape from the reality that was slowly sinking in. I didn't move, I didn't flinch. I simply watched as they processed the impossible, as they realized that I had never been gone, that I had been watching them for days, hearing every word, feeling every betrayal. "I told you I wasn't dead," I said, stepping closer to Emily. My voice was steady, controlled. "I've been alive this whole time, watching, listening. You thought you could deceive me. You thought you could bury me and take what was mine." Emily took a step back, her eyes wide with panic. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Michael, still in his state of shock, glanced between the two of us, unsure of how to react. He was calculating, always calculating, but now he seemed to be drowning in the consequences of his own lies. "You've been lying to me for years, Emily. And you, Michael." I turned my gaze to him, the same coldness in my voice. "You've been helping her all along, but you forgot one thing: I am still here." The air felt thick, suffocating, as they both stood frozen, trapped in the silence that stretched between us. My heart raced, but I was calm, so calm. This was my moment. They had no idea what was coming next. "You know what's truly sickening, don't you?" I continued, my voice dropping lower. "It's not that you've lied to me, it's that you've lied to yourselves. You've convinced yourselves that what you've done, what you were planning, is justified, that it's all for your own gain, but you're wrong." Emily's face twisted with guilt, her hands trembling in front of her as she struggled to hold herself together, but I could see it deep down. I knew she had thought I was gone, that she had convinced herself that the truth would never come out. She wasn't just afraid of the consequences of what they had done, she was afraid of being exposed for the fraud she had become. "I don't want your money, Emily," I said, stepping closer. "I don't need your lies or your betrayal. What I want, what I deserve, is something far more personal." The next few hours were a blur. I had prepared carefully for this. The evidence, the recordings, the secrets they thought I didn't know, everything was on display now. As I sat with them, forcing them to confront the truth, I revealed everything. The cameras that had been hidden in the walls, the conversations they thought were private, the lies, the deceit, the manipulation. "I know everything," I told them, my voice cutting through the thick silence. "I know about the will. I know about the life insurance policy. I know how you've been planning to take everything from me, how you've been planning my death." Their faces were pale, drained of color as I dropped each revelation. Emily's shoulders slumped, her gaze cast downward as Michael fumbled for words, unable to defend themselves against the mountain of evidence I had gathered. "You thought you were so clever," I said, "that you could play me for a fool, but you didn't count on one thing: I'm not the person you thought I was." I watched them crumble, watched them break under the weight of their own guilt, but even as they begged, even as Emily's voice cracked in desperation, I remained unmoved. I wasn't going to forgive them, not for what they had done, not for the years of lies. As they finally realized the full extent of what they had lost, I turned away, my heart heavy but my spirit unbroken. I knew what I had to do. I walked out of that house not as the woman who had been betrayed, but as someone who had found a sense of power in reclaiming her life. The revenge wasn't in the words I spoke, it was in the actions I had taken. I had exposed them, shown them for who they really were, and now, they would have to live with the consequences.